There was a moment in your life, and you know exactly which one I'm talking about, where everything fell apart at the same time. The job, the relationship, the health, the hope. And in that moment, in the dead of night, when the whole world was asleep and you were lying there staring at the ceiling, you had one thought that scared you more than anything else. You thought, maybe God forgot about me. Maybe you prayed so many times and heard nothing back. Maybe you watched other people get their miracles while yours never came. Maybe you started to wonder if faith was even real anymore, or if you were just talking to empty air all this time. If that's been you, if you've ever felt invisible to God, forgotten by heaven, left behind when everyone else seemed to be moving forward, I need you to stop what you're doing right now and stay with me, because what I'm about to share with you today changed everything for me. And I genuinely believe it was meant to reach you at this exact moment in your life. Welcome to God Message Global. I'm so glad you're here today. Let me tell you about a woman named Sarah. Not from the Bible, just an ordinary woman from a small town in Ohio. Single mother, 2 kids, working double shifts at a hospital just to keep the lights on. Every Sunday she went to church. Every night she prayed. She tithed when she barely had enough. She did everything right by her faith. And then one February, her car broke down. Her oldest son got sick, and she got a letter saying her rent was going up $200 a month starting in 30 days, all in the same week. She told me she sat in her car in the hospital parking lot after a 12-hour shift, and she just cried. Not quietly, the ugly kind of crying where you can't breathe. And she said out loud, right there in that parking lot, "God, where are you? I've been faithful. I've been trying. I don't understand why you keep letting this happen to me." And then, something strange happened. A coworker she barely knew knocked on her car window. This woman had never spoken more than 10 words to Sarah before, but she stood there in the cold, and when Sarah rolled down the window, she said, "I don't know why, but I feel like I'm supposed to tell you, you're not alone in this. God sees exactly what you're carrying right now." Sarah said those words broke something open inside her chest. Here's what I want you to understand about that moment. God didn't send Sarah a check that night. He didn't fix her car or pay her rent in the next 10 minutes, but he sent her a message through a near stranger in a cold parking lot at her absolute lowest point, just to let her know that he had not looked away. That is who God is. And that's what this channel is about. Not a prosperity gospel where you just name it and claim it and everything goes smooth. Real life is harder than that, and you already know it. This is about the God who shows up in the parking lots, in the 3 a.m. silence, in the text from a friend you haven't heard from in months, in the song that comes on the radio right when you needed those exact words. He is always communicating. The question is whether we've learned how to recognize it. I grew up being told that God speaks through the Bible and through prayer, and that is absolutely true. But somewhere along the way, a lot of us were taught that if we weren't hearing a clear, booming voice from the sky, then maybe God wasn't speaking to us at all. And that lie, that silent, subtle lie, has left millions of people feeling abandoned by the very God who has never once taken his eyes off them. Right now, today, no matter what your situation looks like, whether you're facing financial pressure that keeps you up at night, a relationship that feels broken beyond repair, a health scare that's sitting heavy in the back of your mind, or just that deep, unexplainable emptiness that doesn't go away no matter how busy you stay, God knows. He is not surprised by your situation. He is not overwhelmed by your mess. He is not tired of your prayers. In fact, the Bible says in Isaiah 43 that when you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. Not around the fire, not away from it, through it. God never promised to remove every hard thing from your path, but he promised something far more powerful than that. He promised to walk through it with you. Sarah eventually found a way through that month. A neighbor helped with her son. A mechanic at her church fixed her car for almost nothing. And slowly, piece by piece, things began to shift. Not all at once, not perfectly, but enough to keep going. She told me later that the hardest part wasn't the problems themselves. The hardest part was the moment before she believed help was coming. That moment of almost giving up. That was the real battle. And friend, if you're in that moment right now,
I need you to hold on just a little longer, because the message God has for you today is the same one He sent to Sarah in that parking lot. I see you. I have not forgotten you. I am with you in this. Stay with me, because what's coming next is going to go even deeper into how God speaks directly into the specific pain you're carrying right now, and why the timing of you finding this today is not an accident.
I want to ask you something personal, and I need you to really sit with it for a second. When was the last time something happened in your life that you couldn't explain? Something that was just a little too perfectly timed to be a coincidence? Maybe it was a phone call that came right when you were at your lowest. Maybe it was a verse you stumbled across that felt like it was written specifically for your situation. Maybe it was just a moment of unexpected peace in the middle of total chaos. Most people brush those moments off. They call it luck. They call it coincidence. They move on and forget about it by the next day. But what if those moments are actually the most important moments of your life? What if those are the moments God is trying to get your attention, not with thunder and lightning, but with the quiet, unmistakable precision of a father who knows exactly what his child needs and exactly when they need it? See, we tend to look for God in the big, dramatic moments. We want the burning bush. We want the parted sea. We want the moment so obvious that nobody could possibly question it. And I understand that. When you're desperate, you don't want subtle. You want clear, you want loud, you want undeniable. But here's what I've learned, and here's what I believe with everything in me. God is far more present in the ordinary moments than most of us have ever been taught to recognize. Think about the story of Elijah in the Bible. This was a man who had just called down fire from heaven. Literally, he had watched God perform one of the most dramatic miracles in all of Scripture. And then, just days later, he was running for his life, hiding under a tree in the desert, telling God he was done. He wanted to die. This powerful prophet, this man of incredible faith, completely broken. And what did God do? He didn't send another fire. He didn't show up with thunder. He sent an angel to touch Elijah on the shoulder and say, "Get up and eat. The food is ready. You've got a long journey ahead and you need your strength." That's it. That was the divine response to Elijah's breakdown. Not a sermon, not a rebuke, not a list of reasons why Elijah should pull himself together. Just get up, eat something. I've got you. And then, when God did finally speak to Elijah directly, the Bible tells us he wasn't in the wind, he wasn't in the earthquake, he wasn't in the fire. He was in a still, small voice, a gentle whisper. I think about that every single time someone tells me they can't hear God anymore. Because the truth is, most of us have been so conditioned to look for the earthquake that we've completely missed the whisper. And the whisper has been there the whole time. So, how do you start hearing it? The first thing I want to share with you today is this. You have to slow down enough to listen. I know that sounds simple. I know you've probably heard it before. But I'm not just talking about slowing down physically. I'm talking about slowing down emotionally, because a lot of us are carrying so much noise inside, so much anxiety, so much unprocessed grief, so much fear about the future that even in the quiet moments, we're still drowning. There's a man I know, his name is David, and he spent 3 years absolutely consumed by the fear that he was going to lose everything. His business was struggling, his marriage was under pressure. He was waking up at 4 in the morning every single night with his heart racing, running through worst-case scenarios in his head. And every morning he would pray, genuinely pray, asking God to speak to him, to guide him, to show him what to do. And he told me that for a long time he heard nothing. Until one morning, he stopped asking God to fix everything and just sat in complete silence. No agenda, no list of requests, just silence. And in that silence, he said he felt, not heard, but felt one single thought settle into his mind with a clarity that didn't feel like his own. The thought was this: you are trying to carry tomorrow's weight with today's strength. Stop. That was it. Nothing spectacular, no vision, no dream, no voice, just a quiet, firm, loving redirection. He said that one thought changed the entire way he approached a situation. He stopped trying to solve everything at once. He stopped living 3 months ahead of himself in his mind. And slowly, not immediately, not without struggle, but slowly, things began to turn. Friend, I don't know exactly what you're carrying right now, but I know this. If you've been praying and feeling like the line is dead, if you've been faithful and still feel like you're falling behind, if you've been holding on but your grip is getting weaker, God has not gone silent on you. He is speaking. He has always been speaking. And in the next part, I'm going to share something that I believe is going to fundamentally shift the way you see your current situation. Because what looks like abandonment right now has a completely different name when you see it from the other side. Don't go anywhere.
I need to tell you something that took me a long time to accept, and when I finally did accept it, it didn't make me feel better right away. It actually made me sit in silence for a long time, just thinking. But eventually, it became one of the most freeing truths I've ever held on to. Here it is. Some of the hardest seasons of your life were not punishments, they were preparations. I know how that sounds. I know that when you're in the middle of it, when the bank account is almost empty, when the doctor gives you news you weren't ready for, when someone you loved walks away and doesn't look back, the last thing you want to hear is that this is somehow part of a plan. That feels dismissive. It can even feel cruel. So I'm not going to just throw that at you and move on. I want to actually walk through what that means, because there's a difference between someone telling you everything happens for a reason in a way that shuts down your pain and actually understanding the way God works in the deepest, darkest valleys of a human life. Let me take you back to Joseph. Not the Joseph from the New Testament, the one with the coat of many colors, because his story is one of the most brutally honest stories in the entire Bible, and I think it speaks directly to where a lot of you are right now. Joseph was his father's favorite son. He had dreams, literal, God-given dreams, that showed him he was going to do something significant with his life. He had every reason to believe his future was bright. And then, his own brothers threw him in a pit and sold him into slavery. Not strangers, his family, the people who were supposed to love him most. He ended up in Egypt as a slave in a wealthy man's household, and just when things were starting to stabilize, just when he was finding his footing, he was falsely accused of something he didn't do and thrown into prison. Years passed, real years, not a rough week or a hard month, years behind bars for something he never did, serving a God he never stopped believing in, with absolutely no sign that anything was ever going to change. Now I want you to sit in that for a moment, because that is not a feel-good story at the halfway point. That is a man who did everything right, who had genuine God-given purpose, who was faithful even when it cost him everything, and who still ended up forgotten in a prison cell. If Joseph had a phone and found this video in that prison, what would he have needed to hear? He would have needed to hear exactly what I'm telling you right now. What looks like the end of your story is not the end of your story. Because here's what happened to Joseph. In that prison, he developed something that could not have been developed anywhere else. He learned how to interpret dreams, a skill that would eventually bring him before Pharaoh himself. He learned patience that ran deeper than personality. He developed a character that had been refined by fire, by betrayal, by loneliness, by years of unanswered questions. And when the moment came, when God's timing finally aligned, Joseph wasn't just ready for it. He was exactly the right person for it. Not despite everything he had suffered, because of it. He went from the prison to the palace in a single day. And when he finally stood face to face with the brothers who had betrayed him, he didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't say, "Look at me now." He wept, he embraced them, and he said something that has stayed with me every time I've faced something I couldn't understand. He said, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." That is not a passive statement. That is a man who lived through the pit, through the slavery, through the prison, through the years of silence, and came out the other side with a perspective that could only be forged in that exact fire. Now I want to speak to someone specific right now. Someone who has been through a betrayal that cuts so deep you still feel it. Someone who trusted the wrong person, maybe in business, maybe in marriage, maybe in friendship, and you ended up paying a price you never should have had to pay. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a part of you has been asking God why He let that happen, why He didn't protect you, why He didn't warn you in time. I want you to hear this clearly. God saw every moment of it. He was not absent, He was not distracted, and the fact that He allowed it does not mean He approved of it or was indifferent to your pain. It means He is working with a timeline and a perspective that goes beyond what either of us can see from where we're standing right now. The pit is not your destination. It is your transition.
There's something else I want to address because I think it's one of the most common and most painful places people get stuck, and that is the feeling that you've wasted too much time, that too many years have gone by, that the window has closed, that maybe the promise God put in your heart was real once, but you missed it, you messed up, you took too many wrong turns, and now it's too late. I need you to hear me on this. It is not too late. God does not operate on the same timeline we do. Scripture is full of people who received their breakthrough later than anyone expected. Abraham was 100 years old when his promised son was born. Moses was 80 when he led the Exodus. Anna, the prophetess, waited her entire life, decades of faithful, patient devotion, and she lived to see the Messiah with her own eyes. Your age is not an obstacle to God. Your past is not an obstacle to God. Your mistakes are not an obstacle to God. The only thing that can truly delay what God has for you is the decision to stop believing it's still possible. And that is exactly why the enemy works so hard to make you feel like it's over. Because if he can get you to quit, not through a dramatic crisis, but just through slow, quiet discouragement, then he doesn't have to fight you anymore. You'll do his job for him. So today, right now, I'm asking you to make a decision. Not a decision based on what your circumstances look like, not a decision based on how long you've been waiting or how tired you feel, a decision based on one single question. Do you believe that God is still God? If the answer is yes, even a shaky, tired, barely holding on yes, then your story is not over. And what's coming next is going to show you exactly how to hold on to that belief, even when everything around you is telling you to let go. Stay with me.
I want to start this last part by being completely honest with you. I almost didn't make this video. Not because I didn't believe in the message, but because there was a small voice in the back of my mind, and maybe you know this voice too, that said, who are you to speak into someone else's life? What makes you think your words are going to matter to anyone? That voice of self-doubt that shows up right before you're about to do something that could actually make a difference. And I sat with that for a while. I prayed about it. And what came back to me was simple and clear. It's not about you. It's about the person who needs to hear it. So if you've made it all the way to this point in the video, I don't think that's an accident. I think you were meant to be here today. I think something in you knew you needed this, needed to be reminded that you are not forgotten, that your pain has purpose, that the silence you've been hearing from heaven is not rejection, it is preparation. Let me bring everything together right here at the end, because I don't want you to walk away from this with just good feelings that fade by tomorrow morning. I want you to walk away with something real, something you can hold on to at 3 in the morning when the anxiety creeps back in and the doubt gets loud again. Here is what we covered today, and I want you to really let this land. First, God has not forgotten you, not for a single second. The woman in the hospital parking lot, crying alone after a 12-hour shift, thinking she was invisible. She wasn't invisible, and neither are you. God sees the specific weight you are carrying right now. He knows the exact number of nights you've lain awake worrying. He knows the prayers you've prayed out loud and the ones you've only prayed in your heart because you didn't even have the words. He sees all of it, every single piece of it. Second, God speaks in whispers more often than earthquakes. If you've been waiting for a dramatic, undeniable sign and missing all the quiet ones along the way, I want to gently challenge you to start paying attention differently. The unexpected kindness from a stranger, the song that hits different on a random Tuesday, the thought that settles into your mind with a peace that doesn't feel like your own. These are not coincidences. These are communications. Start treating them that way. Third, your hardest season is not your final season. Joseph didn't stay in the pit. He didn't stay in the prison. And you will not stay in this either. What feels like abandonment right now has a different name on the other side. It is called preparation. It is called refinement. It is called the process that produces the kind of depth and strength and wisdom that simply cannot be manufactured any other way. The fire is real, but so is the promise that you will not be consumed by it. And fourth, it is not too late. Whatever that dream is that you've been quietly grieving, whatever promise you've been slowly talking yourself out of believing, whatever version of your life you've been afraid to hope for because you've been disappointed too many times, bring it back, pick it back up. Because a God who parted the Red Sea, who brought a dead man out of a tomb, who turned water into wine at a wedding,
That God is not intimidated by your timeline or your past or your current circumstances. He already knows the end of your story, and He is already working in the parts you haven't lived yet. Now, I want to say something directly to you, not as a content creator, not as someone performing for an audience, but as someone who genuinely cares about the people who find their way to this channel. I built God Message Global because I believe the world needs more spaces where real faith meets real life. Not polished, perfect, everything is wonderful faith. The kind of faith that gets tested. The kind that bends but doesn't break. The kind that shows up even when it doesn't feel like anything is working. That is the faith I want to talk about. That is the conversation I want to have with you every single time you come here. And I need your help to keep that conversation going. If this video spoke to something real inside you today, if even one moment made you feel less alone, or gave you something to hold on to, or reminded you of a truth you had started to forget, would you do me something right now? Hit that like button. I know it sounds small, but every like tells the platform that this message is worth sharing, and that means it reaches someone else who might be sitting in their own parking lot tonight, crying in the dark, wondering if God has forgotten them. Your one click could be the reason that person finds this video tomorrow. That matters more than you know. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do that right now. Not just so you don't miss the next video, but because what we're building here at God Message Global is a community, a real one, a place where people who are struggling with real life can come and be reminded of real truth without being judged for their doubts or their questions or the fact that they're not okay right now. You belong in that community. Subscribe and become part of it. Share this video with someone who needs it. You already thought of someone while I was talking. I know you did. That friend who's been going through it lately, that family member who's been quiet in a way that worries you, that person from your church or your neighborhood who you know is carrying something heavy right now. Send this to them. You don't even have to explain it. Just send it and let the message do the work. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do for someone we love is simply say, "I heard this and I thought of you." And leave a comment. I read them. Not a team, not an assistant, me. I want to know where you are in your journey. I want to know what part of this video hit home for you. I want to know what you're believing God for right now, because your story matters, and this community shows up for each other in the comments in ways that never stop surprising me. Before I close, I want to leave you with one question, and I don't want you to answer it quickly. I want you to sit with it today, maybe even write it down somewhere, and let it do some honest work in your heart. Here it is. If you truly believed, not just intellectually, but deep in your bones, in the quiet part of you that doesn't perform for anyone, if you truly believed that God was actively working on your behalf right now, even in the middle of everything you're facing, even in the silence, even in the waiting, what would you do differently tomorrow morning? Would you wake up with a little less dread? Would you make that phone call you've been putting off? Would you take that first step towards something you'd been too afraid to start? Would you finally let go of something you've been holding on to out of fear instead of faith? Think about that. Really think about it. Because the life that answer points to, that is the life that is available to you. Not someday, not once things get easier. Right now, starting tomorrow morning. God is with you. He has always been with you, and He is not finished with your story yet.